who really owns South Africa? Most people think they already know the answer. Some will say the government. Other people will say the white monopoly capital. Some say the people, because South Africa is a democratic state. But what if all these answers are incomplete? Hi, I'm Bungemesh. On this channel, we explore ideas and issues that shape our society, from history and geopolitics to culture and current affairs. If you're someone who enjoys this type of content, I'd recommend that you hit the subscribe button. Why is this an important question? South Africa remains one of the most unequal countries in the world. Well, others have went to an extent of calling it the most unequal country in the world. I refuse to believe that that is by coincidence. What if the people who actually control South Africa want it to be this way? Well, that's if individuals control South Africa. At first glance, this looks like a political question. After all, South Africa is a democracy, right? So majority elects the government, and then the government then make laws. And these laws on paper are supposed to align with what the majority wants. Subsequently, we could say the majority or the people own the country. Well, not quite. The question who really owns South Africa seeks to find out who really benefits from South Africa's economy, who shapes investment, who controls capital, who influences policy. So we're not asking a political question, we're asking a socio-economic question. On that note, before we go any further, I think we need to address the semantics. What does it actually mean to own a country? The constitution makes it impossible for one individual or just a single group to own the state. So this ownership exists in different forms. People can own mines, they can own land, banks, factories, retail chains, shares in the JSE, and so on and so forth. So the more productive assets you own, the more influence you have in the South African economy. Now, since 1994, every South African has one vote. So this gives citizens political power. Citizens are allowed to change government. And we've seen that happen throughout the years. By receiving democracy, we do not inherently receive economic power. We see that because governments have changed over the years. However, many businesses remain, even businesses which were benefiting in apartheid days. And this is the reason why inequality can persist even when governments change. And what's so ironic is that people often change governments believing that this will change their economic reality. Other people argue that realistically, the government does own South Africa. They own the roads, they own the port, SOEs, public hospitals, schools, land, and many other assets. But this is only partially true because the government itself doesn't exist independently. It's often controlled by whichever party wins elections. And ideally, government assets belong to the public. So they belong to the people, the citizens, who voted for that specific government. So simply saying that the government owns South Africa does not necessarily answer the question. It only insinuates that South Africa is owned by politicians. Those are the people that citizens vote into power. But now, this is where things get interesting. Political parties, the people that we vote into governance, compete for those positions of power. So they compete for those political seats. And in order to win those elections, they often rely on donations. They receive donations from wealthy individuals and businesses. According to South Africa's political funding disclosures, wealthy donors such as Patrice Motsepe, Martin, the Oppenheimer family have donated millions of rands to multiple parties across the political spectrum. So this means that the ANC, the DA, Action SA, EFF, different parties have in some ways received money from these individuals. Well, this doesn't mean corruption. Political donations are legal, but it raises an important question. If wealthy individuals are the ones who finance these parties which are supposed to hold political power and represent the masses, and also that the same people seem to finance the same political parties, the parties which claim that they have different ideological positions, then how much influence does wealth have regardless of who wins elections? Then there's this issue of private ownership. This is where this conversation becomes highly political, because some people have argued that South Africa is controlled by the white monopoly capital. The argument is that the same white people who had wealth then are still the people who control wealth today. However, other people argue that ownership became highly complex after 1994. This is because there was a rise of foreign investment. There was growth of black business elites due to things like policies like the BEE. There's a rise of institutional investors. So the economy is no longer owned by one clearly defined group, but still This doesn't mean that ownership is evenly distributed. I did highlight this in the beginning of the video. South Africa is still believed to be one of the most unequal countries in the world. But somehow, asset prices continue rising. Shareholders are becoming wealthier. I'm not claiming here that the market causes inequality, but this demonstrates a very clear pattern. For some reason, there is this correlation between economic growth or lack thereof and wealth creation. As the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. So who really owns South Africa? It's not the politicians, it's not the government alone, it's not a racial group alone. For the Marxists who like screaming white monopoly capital. Well, South Africa is clearly owned by those who run large companies. These are the people who own banks, they own mining firms, investment funds, agricultural businesses, and increasingly international investors. Our political leaders only govern, and they are often influenced by those same individuals. Perhaps that's one of the reasons why South Africa remains one of the most unequal countries in the world. That's it for today's video. Please make sure that you leave a like, share, comment, and don't forget to subscribe. It's very important, guys.